words. He hung up on me. In the very end, his voice quivered as if on the verge of tears. It was the first time I had ever heard Fen sound truly defeated. Scared? Helpless? All I could think was that those words, that apology, could be the last that I would ever hear from Fen. God, all this time and I still didn't even know his first name. Stumbling in the dark, I left my boots and my jacket behind, fully prepared to step out the front door in boxer shorts and a ratty t-shirt as I raced from my apartment and started to make my way down the stairs one clumsy step at a time. There were already people gathered in the hallway, trying to get down for a closer look. I was one of them. I pushed my way through the crowd and down to the front exit of the building, where the square glass windows showed a world of pure gray. It was too late. The fog had swallowed us, an icy cold draft seeping underneath the door and dark figures shifting within the mist. "Out of the way!" I shouted, standing on my toes to try seeing over the taller people in the crowd. "I'm with Pinehaven Radio. I need to get through." As my new neighbors shuffled, some getting closer to the door and others getting further away, I managed to squeeze between them enough to escape. I jammed my shoulder against the door and pushed out into the freezing cold. It was like entering another dimension. The thick fog turned the air gray, freezing vapors sticking to my face while my breath mingled with the mist. At once, I was both lonely and surrounded in a world full of noise, but completely blind. The streets of Pinehaven were loud and populated. The siren still blared, but its tones were distorted, far away. It sounded like it was being choked by the storm. I shivered in the blustery wind, gripping my car keys in a frozen, stiff fist while every step felt like daggers on the bottoms of my feet. All I had to do was get to my car. But I couldn't even see the sidewalk. I felt the ice and snow against my numb toes, and I felt the vibration of something under the pavement. But my free hand was reaching for nothing at all. Not far away, someone shrieked, and I jumped, covering my mouth to silence a scream of my own. The sound of torn flesh was followed by a wet slap, conjuring images of parts being tossed onto the concrete. The street lamp above my head burst in a shower of light, cords snapping. That flash of light was enough for me to find my truck, its silhouette appearing through the mist. Something else was there, too. White, glowing eyes and many limbs, crouching on top of the hood and chittering through its teeth. From a distance, it looked like a massive spider, but I knew better. This thing had human skin, pulled tightly over mismatched bones. As I was plunged back into darkness, the heavy thing launched down to the ground and rushed by me, circling from one side to the other. It smelled of blood and sour, sickly sweet bile. I took a few hesitant steps back, the beast answering my presence with a hiss of feral curiosity. It was watching me, studying me. Before it could pounce, I turned around and raced back toward the apartments, my hands finding the rough brick wall first. I pounded my sore, frozen hands against it until I finally found the smooth surface of the front door. It was jammed, but a few frantic knocks was all it took for one of my fellow tenants to pull it open while I stumbled inside. The monster wasn't far behind. I heard it clicking, hissing, and snarling as it blindly searched for me every step of the way, its long limbs tapping the bricks. A few more steps and it would have pulled me right back. "It's too late," I said to my neighbors as I shoved the door closed once more, locking the deadbolt before putting some more distance between myself and that thing. "We have to stay here. There's something out there. We have to stay inside." "What was it?" a middle-aged woman asked, her eyes wide as she shivered under her robe. Two small children, likely her grandkids, were clinging to her legs, and she was trying to shield them with both hands. "I don't know," I whispered. How could I even begin to explain? Just trust me. Everything was deathly silent. And then, Bang! A heavy mass pounded against the door, making the metal hinges whine and the frame rattle. It happened again, harder the second time. Everyone in the crowd jumped backward as the glass began to crack. One person screamed, another was already running back up the stairs, and the rest were frozen in paralyzed fear. Maybe if we were quiet, the thing would lose interest. Maybe it wouldn't hear us. As it turned out, we were already found. All at once, the glass shattered inward, and the fog started to seep into the apartment building, filling the hall and rolling toward us at an alarming pace. The red glow of the exit sign disappeared, drowned in thick, pale waves of mist, while the spider's limbs clawed at the broken glass. "Everyone go! Go, go, go!" I yelled, grabbing the nearest person and pushing them towards the stairwell. "Back upstairs! Get inside! Lock your doors! Just go!" One of the older men in the crowd helped me push the crowds back, getting every panicked body to move in a straight line. The doors shook and the frames splintered. Something strong and heavy was attempting to fight its way in. The crowd was congested, some people too afraid to move and others stumbling over themselves while they fought to stick together. In the shuffle, we weren't quick enough. More of those long, dark, spider-like limbs covered in pulsing blue veins reached in through the broken window, followed by another and another. From a beast with many arms, some human and some animal. It grabbed the nearest person, a young man, and pulled him toward the door until his back snapped against the dented metal. Fuck. The way it broke him to pieces. It was unbearable to watch. With its many hands, the beast tore the man's limbs from his torso, each gnarled set of claws snatching a newly separated part and dragging them through the window. The man was still alive, mouth open and eyes wide in shock as his skin started to drain to a pale, ghostly color. When the beast finally cracked the head off of his shoulders, the rest dropped to the floor and his terrified, petrified face was taken as a trophy. His torso was still twitching as it sprayed the crowd with warm, fresh blood. I wasn't spared from the mess. My neighbors finally began to move, frantic and screaming. One of those long, crooked limbs reached beneath the door and grabbed me by the leg, its claws digging into my flesh. The pain was cold. It was like being submerged in icy water, spreading pins and needles up to my knee, and all I could do was hold onto the railing for dear life. The creature only dropped me when a brave neighbor stomped his heavy boot down on the limb, cracking the brittle bones until it shrieked and loosened its grip. I raced up to my floor, dragging the injured leg behind me. As I slammed the apartment door shut, the last thing I saw was a view of the stairwell and something large crawling its way up on dozens of mutated, mismatched limbs. It lumbered, its swollen and misshapen body dragging a trail of blood and ooze behind it like a slug. It had someone in its arms. They were flailing and twitching, already covered in blood with broken limbs hanging at odd angles. God, I didn't know what to do. I was trapped here with no way to get to the broadcast room, and Daniel was just gone. Finn was gone. I locked the door with shaky fingers, still sticky with drying blood, and shoved a heavy box against it. Even with the push of my weight, I still felt the door rattle as the beast pounded its body against it. I pulled out my phone again and I called and called and called, and nothing happened. No one would answer me. I was the only one left. I texted Daniel. "Where are you? Are you okay? Answer me, please." Nothing. Nothing at all. I started to hyperventilate, tears running down my face as I realized that this could be the end of everything. I grabbed the radio in both hands, gripping it tightly as I sat cross-legged on the floor and rocked back and forth. The creature was patrolling up and down the halls outside my door, banging on every surface as it searched for a way in. The drywall was starting to crack. I focused on the radio, on the smell of smoke and gasoline. It was the last memory I had of my father. I looked at the photo on the fridge, Daniel and I making faces with sweaty hair stuck to our foreheads. The last memory of my best friend. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." But something broke through the white noise. I heard a voice. Dan's voice. It was soft and shaky, like a mere crackle at first, until at last he whispered a few quiet words. He said he was alive. The buzz of static interrupted his hushed murmurs and turned to white noise again, but he was alive. With a turn of the dial, those garbled sounds and ear-piercing screeches became louder until a few hard slaps against the radio began to clear the airwaves. Daniel sounded far away, his voice carrying a frail, heartbroken tremble. Between moments of blaring static, I heard the squeak of his chair rolling and the thump of his arm hitting the table. Dan was getting out of his seat. I kept calling him. He ignored me every time, and no matter how many times I tried to scream his name at the top of my lungs or shout profanities into his voicemail box, he would never hear me. "Don't go out there," I was thinking. "Whatever you do, just don't you dare go out there, you dumb son of a bitch." In an instant, it all stopped. The radio gave one final whine, sharp and mechanical. And then it was silent. I couldn't call. I couldn't text. Daniel and I were suddenly worlds apart. That mile between us may as well have been an ocean. The room was nearly pitch black. The fog had blocked out the moonlight, but a faint purple glow crept beneath my door. I knew something was on the other side. When it lumbered past, I saw its massive shadow block out the light, followed by the sickening sound of its wet, heavy body dragging itself down the hall. The smell of blood was strong. I couldn't tell if it was coming from my beast or my injured leg. Maybe it could smell me. It could probably hear me gasping for breath. The creature's pace slowed to a stop. I heard its terrible wheezing, its jaws rattling with what I could only imagine was a mouthful of hot, fresh blood and tissue. It scratched against the door and slid long, sharp fingers beneath it, scraping the tile with a tooth-aching sound. I covered my mouth. It didn't matter. The beast already knew I was there. And as it toyed with me, patient and torturous, the stain its fingers left began to branch across the wood like a growing fungus. And then, bang! As the abomination tossed its weight against the wall, trying desperately to get inside, a flicker of light through the window struck me as something new. Until now, I hadn't paid attention to the layer of fog that had completely covered every inch of our sleepy mountain town. The streets disappeared, fading into an obscure lump of blurry color and shape. Some of those shapes were moving. All the while, just below my building, the solitary glow of a single street lamp began to flicker until it burst in a quick, startling shower of sparks. I heard the crack of wood and the groan of taut wire as a telephone pole began to fall, crashing into the pavement. It was followed by several more. The town was falling apart. The ground shook. Fire hydrants burst open. Down the street, gunshots rang out and screams followed. Doors slammed, windows shattered, and somewhere on the floor below, my fellow tenants were running up and down the halls. I wasn't the only one huddled against the window, watching with anxiety and anticipation to see what was waiting for us in the mist. Something out there took heavy, thundering steps. It snapped wires, sending sparks flying like July fireworks. In those tiny moments of shimmering light, I could see the sharp silhouette of long, gnarled horns. My skin was crawling as I realized how tall it stood. Tall enough to push the telephone poles down with ease. It treaded slowly, voicing the low roar of a massive and ancient beast. No. Not him. Not him. I heard a scream before I saw anything else. A young girl in the apartment below shrieked, but her voice was quickly muffled by the comforting shush of a parent. Moments later, I saw it for myself. A family of vines began to creep their way up from the edge of the window, spreading out over the frosted glass. What first appeared as a slithering plant life soon became something else. Pulsating blossoms opened, a disgustingly thick, dark liquid seeping out from between the petals. It was followed by blood-soaked fingers that crawled out and tapped at the glass, connected to the vines where the wrists might be. The hands were moldy and gray, like the skin of something long drowned. They were so small. Although they had no eyes to see me, the vines clawed at the glass with a sharp, ear-splitting sound. They knew someone was on the other side, and they were desperate to break through. Hungry, frantic, and trembling. I couldn't put my finger on this feeling. It felt worse seeing the fog from here than it did to see it from inside the forest itself. Perhaps I just felt helpless. Out here, I was trapped. I couldn't help. I couldn't run away. I couldn't even say goodbye. Out here, all I could do was watch as the world ended. The sound of massive, thundering footsteps was far away at first. Something was circling the village, every huge, slow step activating car alarms and cracking the pavement. When it started to come my way, there was nothing I could do but push myself into a corner, waiting, watching. The cups on my kitchen counter shivered, the vibration inching them precariously close to the edge. Before I could react, one of them slid off and shattered on the floor. But the sound of breaking glass was nowhere near as chilling as the sharp scrape of antlers against the side of the building. The behemoth was close enough to dip its head, peering into the windows of my downstairs neighbors. Its horns made the most terrible noise as they scratched against the bricks. And when it got closer, I saw it. Many pairs of eyes, white and glowing, stared at me through the swirling fog as a warm mist formed on the window from its breath. It made a sound like the cry of an elk, only low and alien, followed by a shivering death rattle. I could still remember how the monster smelled. Soil, mold, and old, rotten flesh. One of those eyes used to be mine, but now it was dead and blind. I wondered if the beast remembered. My foot caught a shard of broken glass when I stepped back, and I hissed out in pain. My door continued to rattle. Dust fell from the ceiling as more and more beasts from Pine Haven Forest invaded the building. The thing with many arms was still trying to find a way in, punching at the wall and clawing at the hinges. I rushed to the bathroom and slammed the door behind me. There was a leak somewhere, cold water dripping onto the floor and leaving slick puddles. The room was plunged into total darkness. I listened to the sound of whispers coming up from deep within the pipes. The sink began to gurgle, a dark fluid bubbling up from deep within. It dripped down the edges of the porcelain and onto the floor where it hissed and released a cloud of hot steam like boiling water. I crawled away from it, backed up into a corner in a tiny ball. The floor shook as tremors continued to pass through the apartment building. My neighbors were screaming in agony between the walls. Neighbors who had been too curious or who had left their doors unlocked. I got to hear their final moments of violent, visceral terror, waiting for my own turn. Something was inside the walls. It scuttled about, infecting even the spaces between our fragile sanctuaries. I heard hissing, pounding, scratching, and the whispered voice of something pretending to be human. It could hear me breathing. I couldn't say how long it lasted. Time decided to stand agonizingly still in what could have been either minutes or hours. But the end didn't come in the form of screams and panic. The building didn't collapse. The glass didn't break. The end was a siren too high for me to pick up, one that I recognized only from the howls of Pinehaven's dogs and the faint ringing in my ears. "The bell," I whispered, my voice a quiet puff of breath. I leaned against the wall limply, hands pressed over my racing heart. "You finally did it. You finally did it, Danny boy." Something shuffled from the other side of the wall, large and tired and dragging itself away. I heard it tumbling down the steps and voicing pained groans coming from multiple mouths. Even the behemoth, which had been so intent on pushing the apartment building over like a stack of blocks, was moaning in pain before it, too, started to stagger away. The forest was inching back. My hand reached for the bathroom door handle and I pushed it open with a grunt, breathing in the cold air and coughing out the putrid scent that was coming from the sink. The fog was slipping away. Those massive footsteps were getting quieter, no longer shaking the ground beneath the apartments. Pinehaven, however, was left in utter disrepair. The streets were cracked, snapped power lines had fallen across the roads, scattered shingles were torn from rooftops, and I could see huge prints in the snow where gargantuan hooves had stepped. My apartment was destroyed. There were cracks in the drywall, dust falling from the ceiling. The door had a huge chunk taken out of it, and judging from the black slime covering the floor, that mass of limbs that killed my neighbors had been trying to squeeze through before it left. The quakes from the huge amalgamite's presence had left my items scattered on the floor. Even on the window, I saw the stains of old, rotten blood left behind by those tiny hands that had scratched on the glass in an attempt to get inside. There was a crack in the corner, shaped like a spider's web. The hands almost succeeded. I got a text message moments later. It was from Finn, simply saying, "I think they're gone now." And they were. A procession of footsteps rushed up and down the halls. I unlocked my front door and I joined them, stepping carefully out into the chaos we had all been hiding from. There was blood on the floor, blood on the walls, and dark slime trailing down the stairs like marks from a slug. I could see handprints on doors, and I couldn't tell if the beast had left them or if my more unfortunate neighbors had been pounding their fists in search of safety. I gave myself a chill as I imagined their desperate pleas cut short as they were dragged away. Family and friends too afraid to let them inside. Down the stairs and at the end of the hall, a small crowd had already formed. Hands and faces pressed against the glass and peering through the busted doors. And as my neighbors began to hesitantly creep outside, I pushed my way through the group until my bare and bloodied feet hit the icy cement. Pinehaven was dark, lit only by wandering flashlights and the occasional spark from a broken street lamp. I could hear hushed whispers and distressed shouts. Somewhere down the sidewalk, a man was running from gate to gate, asking desperately if anyone had seen his wife return from her evening walk. With each stop, he grew more panicked. People were crying. Police sirens were already blaring with too many places to go, their lights flashing down the road as they circled the hazards to keep us from getting too close to the worst damage. Nothing was spared. I reached into my memories, thinking of the sirens I used to hear as a child, and the way my mother would close the curtains whenever the fog was heavy on the mountainside. Sometimes we'd sit in the basement. "Storms," she'd say. We'd make a game out of it. Our flashlights became torches in the dark as we explored a mummy's tomb or looked for clues in an eerie, haunted mansion. Back then, I didn't know. Back then, it was never this bad. I drank those memories away for a reason. My pocket began to buzz, and I grabbed it with cold, shaky hands. I nearly dropped it on the pavement in the process. As I pushed and shoved my way back inside the building, I put the phone to my ear and winced with each step that I took on my injured leg. "Daniel?" I answered, hearing a crackle on the other end. The signal was poor, but it began to clear as I got to the staircase. His voice came through at long last. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Even if Dan sounded shaken and exhausted, it was still undoubtedly him. "You did?" I said with a sniffle. "You did it. You're okay, right?" He said softly. "It's okay. It's okay," I assured him, a bit breathless by the time I reached my floor. "Just relax, all right? You got it under control, and that's all that matters. Fuck, I'm just so glad to hear your voice. You have no idea. I was so scared. I was starting to think that you were..." I stopped when I heard his unsteady breathing and the sniffle of a runny nose. He was crying. I could tell. "Take a deep breath, buddy," I said as I tried to unstick the old apartment door. It swung open, and once again I was in the dark, with the scent of mildew and quiet static coming from the radio next to the couch. "Are you going to be okay?" he said while I picked glass out of my foot. We both chuckled softly as we remembered the first time he activated the bell. Poor sucker had to rip out his hearing aid because of the harsh, unforgiving frequency. Daniel gave a small sniffle then, and in the background I could hear the landline ringing non-stop. He said, "Took you long enough," I said with a smirk. Daniel snorted in response. There we were yet again, trying to laugh when nothing was funny. "It was a lot harder to do this time?" he asked. As I touched the tacky blood sticking to my fingertips, I abandoned my injured foot and turned back to the window, watching the distant glow of police lights flash on every street corner. They were somewhat warped by the forest. They were somewhat warped by the frost, creating a dreamlike view of the tattered village. I dreaded seeing what it looked like in the daylight. "It's fine. I'm fine," I told him. It wasn't so bad. There was a long lapse of silence on the other end of the phone. We were both keeping plenty to ourselves, it seemed, too afraid to let the worst be known. Finally, Daniel let out a light huff of breath as if he had been holding it in. He said, "It's a few downed power lines," I said. "It was the lie of the century. Don't worry about it. Our apartment building is still here. It was like a storm, that's all. Besides, cops are always out on the roads. They don't have jack shit else to do." Well, I didn't want him to know yet. He was having a bad enough time as it was. He didn't need to sit all night with the knowledge that the fog had destroyed half the town. People had died. I didn't blame him for it, but I knew Dan would blame himself. He had always been too good for this place. "You know, if you want, I could drive up there," I said. "I'd be up there in just a few minutes. Then you wouldn't have to be alone. I could swing by and pick up Fen, too, and we'd sit it out together, all three of us, just like old times." Daniel paused for a moment, thinking it over. He finally said, he knew better. We didn't sleep. Not when the fog was still in the mountains. On nights like these, when it loomed over the town and watched us from afar, there was never a possibility of rest. He was right about one thing, though. It was getting smarter. As I looked down at the destruction, the peaks looming in the background, I knew that the forest was already trying to find its way back to us. "Sure thing, Danny boy." I went to the kitchen, already getting a pot of coffee ready so I could start my day at 2 a.m. I eyed the tequila I had left on the counter for a moment before breaking off the seal and drinking straight from the bottle. It hit my throat with a pleasant heat that I once promised I'd never feel again. "I'll be here all night," I promised. "I'll be here as long as you need me." Oh, I'm so not ready for this one. I'm not ready for this book. Oh my god. I don't want to go through this again. Oh, I don't want to do this a second time. Fuck. I do want to do this a second time, but I don't want to do this a second time. Ugh. She's not getting her security deposit back. If for those of you that remember we'll call it season 2 or chapter 2 or however you want to state it. It's not though. Season 2, book 2, season 2, I guess, when it was still like a no sleep, when it was originally Accounts from a Lonely Broadcast Station. That one's rough. This one is rough. So for those of you that were there for the original, there's a lot more depth to the novels for A Lonely Broadcast, which is intentional, obviously, because Wynne wanted to include things like Fenn's background and perception and a lot of other stuff. But Kell also went out of their way to include a lot of things and clear up a lot of things. And one of the things that wasn't really super clarified or touched on very often was Evelyn being an alcoholic at one point. And it's fucking rough, dog. Like, there's a scene that happens here shortly in a little bit, about halfway through, I think, this season, that's it's bad. And I'm so scared because she has added stuff and like really expanded upon the original text, and I am so scared to go through it again. Which is a good thing because it means the writing's great, right? It means that, it's doing stuff. It's just damn, I don't want to do this again. I very much do, but I don't. So yeah. That's how we do. Okay. Let me make sure this saved like it was supposed to. Which it looks like it did. Thank you. I appreciate you. I'm glad you guys are having a good time. I know it's been a while. Okay. So chapter 3, I think, is Danny. So it's going to mostly be, this is all going to be just dialogue. So bear with me. We're just going to run it through. I guess I don't need that. So chapter 3 is Danny's. So we won't get to know what's happening in this. You guys are gonna have to buy the audiobook once it comes out for this. So I'm sorry. Yeah, I just was going through it for a minute. I'll be okay. Yeah, no, I want to do it, but you're right. I don't want to go through it again because it's very personal. It hit very, very personal when I read it the first time, and that hasn't changed. So, all right. Morning, bitch mittens. Oh my god. Okay, hold on. Morning, bitch mittens. I figured you earned it. Hope you don't mind. I got him at the rest stop. You know, the one on the mountainside road with the rats. It was the only place open this early. The usual. Got hit by a bus and broke all my bones, fell off an overpass, had a skydiving accident. I just stepped on something sharp last night. Don't worry about it, my guy. How about you? Are you feeling okay? You, were late with the emergency signal. Oh, you got to the bell eventually. I know you did your best. It wasn't your fault. Oomph. Here you go, you little shit beast. Don't say I never gave you nothing. What kind of bird even is he? A chickadee? A sparrow? Hey, why don't you take off? I think I've got it under control now. Besides, old Barty out there will help me keep an eye on the place. Go home, get some sleep. Take a bubble bath or something. Get the forest stink off of you. I will. Don't worry. Go get your rest. I'm sure. Safe travels, cowboy. Dan! Dan, slow down! Jesus Christ! Slow down! Danny, what the absolute fuck were you doing? How did you even get out there? It's almost midnight. You're gonna do all that. And after everything that happened yesterday, after I thought you were dead, you could have gotten hurt. Something could have found you. You could have died out there. Nothing was chasing you, Danny. Nothing was chasing you, Danny. Oh, damn. Sorry, guys. You don't get to know anything about what's going on in context for that one. My bad. Dialogue only. Oh, fuck. Okay, hold on. Let me scan ahead really quick here. Okay. This chapter is still safe. I'm just not 100% that I want to live narrate the chapter that it's coming. I know it's coming. I just don't know if that's something that I want to narrate live, to be honest. That might be one I have to keep to myself. But we'll see. Okay. Give me just a second, though. I think, what is this? Another 20 pages? No, this chapter's okay. I mean, this is a ramp up chapter for sure. Oh no, it super gets intense emotionally. The third book makes sense for how it goes. It's just this particular book picks up some of Evelyn's backstory and things that she went through that the forest inherently uses against her, and it fucked me up the first time I narrated it. And like I said, I know that Wynn has obviously expanded upon the original text and added to it, and I'm just not ready. That's all. But fuck it, we ball. We get boners or whatever. Chapter 4. Evelyn. Oops. Testing. Chapter 4. Recovery isn't linear. Evelyn. Sometimes I hated these security cameras. Let me tell you, as soon as we put these suckers up around the watchtower, I've had to see the worst imaginable bullshit day and night. One of those cameras points to the long driveway, another to the shed. Those ones aren't too bad. But the one that points into the woods? Oh man, that one can just piss right off. I've seen pale, rotten figures floating upside down as if hanging from their toes in the trees. I've seen mutated animals that shouldn't exist and plants trying to pull themselves out of the ground and strangle me. The other day, I saw a deer with its head on backwards staring directly into the camera for an hour before I started throwing rocks at it just to chase it away. Worst part was it started throwing the rocks back. It had hands. Motherfucker had hands. And it's gotten so much worse lately. The day after the fog reached the town, I saw a small procession of glowing white figures floating blindly through the trees in a straight line. I called Sheriff Jacobs asking what we should do in case these people were still alive. He said it was too late. I had to let it go. Sometimes the camera picks up another one joining the ghost parade, all heading towards the same direction as if in a trance. No matter how fast I try to catch up, they always disappear before I can help them. Always. But just this once, I was thankful. After all, I wouldn't have noticed that Daniel was running through the woods if not for that view into the trees. It saved us both a bit of time that night, and Daniel a lot of skin. Once I got him into the broadcasting room and locked the place up safely, he sat against the wall and stared at the window with wide, black eyes. Listen, I'll call the sheriff. He'll send someone over to drive you home, I said, trying to put another blanket over his shoulders. He pushed it off as if the texture bothered him. He said quietly. His voice was hoarse from the cold air. I sat on my knees in front of him. This was familiar to me, this moment. Daniel in distress, both of us on the floor, the fear of being alone. Last time, Dan had looked afraid, sick, traumatized. This time, there was a deeper misery that I couldn't quite reach. Okay. The voice that came out of me was barely more than a whisper. Okay, we'll stay together. He didn't want to talk about his time in the woods. Not yet. For an hour or two, we just sat side by side, letting the radio line up, run, while he listened. For an hour or two, we just sat side by side, letting the radio line up run while he leaned his head on my shoulder and dozed. It couldn't last, of course. In the wee hours of the morning, right before the end of my shift, Finn arrived for his turn in the watchtower. Daniel filled him in on all the details. Finn didn't even let Dan finish his story before he was already fussing, ready to hit him with a rolled-up newspaper. Dan put up his hands defensively. He scratched the back of his neck, wincing slightly as he pulled a small twig out of his collar. Finn was pacing back and forth. I could tell from the frustrated grit of his teeth and the wrinkle between his eyebrows that he was craving a cigarette right now. His hair was getting grayer every day, and I often suspected that we were the cause. Sorry, buddy. This mess is all yours. He pinched the bridge of his crooked, twice-broken nose, letting the stress wash out of him with a long, slow breath. he asked as he sipped from a travel mug. Daniel shrugged. Finn rolled his eyes and gave an annoyed groan, his shoulders sinking. I sat quietly and looked between the two of them. Daniel seemed just as confused as we were while going through the memories of his day. He said. Finn's expression was stern and hard to read. I imagine that mine was not. That didn't sound good, right? Dan had just told me that one of the creatures from the woods had been trying to lure him in the day before, and now his dreams were doing the same. The sleepwalking didn't go unnoticed. I thought about Jennifer. She was a sleepwalker, too. It made me think of her stuffed into that tree, twigs in her mouth, every bone in her body broken, dead and cold. Sweet Jesus, I didn't want to find Daniel like that. Then I remembered the last time I saw Jennifer alive. How we fought and said such horrible, mean things to one another. She told me to leave and never come back. I told her I didn't love her anymore. Would my last words to Daniel be just as cruel? Tears were stinging, but I choked them back. The mask went up again. We're going to have to put a shock collar on you so you can't leave your apartment at night, I chuckled, wearing a false grin. It didn't work. Daniel challenged. Then we'll put mittens on you. Fuck, I don't know, man. We'll glue you to the floor. How's that? With each word, that mask was slipping. I was breathing hard, starting to panic again. The point is, you got really, really, really lucky this time. But next time? Fuck, man. What if something happens to you out there? What if you don't come back? What if you disappear and we find you out there ripped in half or stuffed in a fucking tree? I choked. I didn't want to cry, but it bubbled up inside of me faster than I could prepare. I almost lost my best friend again, and making jokes and teasing one another didn't make it all better. I bit my lip and turned away so the others couldn't see my face, marching to the kitchen so I could put the countertop between us. Dan went silent. I imagined all three of us were thinking the same thing. Every year, survival got harder and harder and harder. When would we reach the limit? Fog days got longer. The forest got smarter. When would we be just another set of numbers in a list of former emergency broadcasters? As if on cue, there was a rumble from below us. The stilts of the tower whined in protest. I braced myself against the counter, sure for a moment that the rusted nails would give out and we would all go toppling down. A tree had fallen in the woods, and another was starting to lean. It cracked and fell to the ground with another loud boom that shook our little corner of the mountain. We heard a familiar bellow, followed by the view of giant, twisted antlers peeking above the pines about a half-mile away. They were covered in blood and thrashing back and forth. The chirp of birds were drowned out by the terrible shrieks of creatures that shouldn't exist, as the forest cannibalized itself again. The strongest grew stronger. The weak were absorbed. The beast was hunting again, closer than usual. He was making himself known. I knew it was a sign. The next fog day, he would be waiting, eager to tear Pine Haven apart and finish what he started. It would come for us before we were even done cleaning the wreckage from the last time. And somewhere deeper in the forest, there was something else. A glowing light, magenta in color, pulsating from somewhere between the trees. Daniel's eyes went wide, the warm color starting to drain from his face. For a moment, he almost looked hypnotized. That's new, I commented. Sunrise, maybe? Fenn corrected me, pointing a thumb to the dark eastern sky. For a long time, we just stared at the glowing horizon, all of us transfixed. It was beautiful and strange, drawing my mind away from the violence happening between the pines, and instead filling my thoughts with a serene and unusual silence. I didn't want to leave. Fenn cleared his throat first, and I jumped. He clapped a hand down on Dan's shoulder. It was a very, very rare moment of gentleness from him. Daniel hesitated, but we could both tell the temptation to leave was too strong. He asked. Fen reassured him. Fen was right. He always stressed the importance of keeping a cool head around here. Most of the former employees were gone because they made a dumb mistake in a moment of panic. It was the death of them, and it would be the death of us too if we didn't keep it together. Dan and I got into my rusty old pickup truck and drove out of town, down the dark, twisting path that circled the mountains. We just needed a breather, just an hour away from Pine Haven. Daniel insisted on grabbing his camera and bringing it with him, taking photos of the drive and the Christmas decorations we saw on the way. We stopped for some fast food and decided to eat it. We stopped for some fast food and decided to eat it in the parking lot while looking out at the quiet streets of a town that wasn't ours. Daniel pointed at me with a French fry. Ducci deli noci? Do-si-do nacho cheese. I cackled like a weird little witch as Daniel tossed a crumpled up napkin at the side of my head. It bounced off and fell somewhere between the seats while we watched a snowplow drive by. I'm jealous, I said, straw in my mouth. They get their roads cleaned before the sun comes up, and we're lucky if the general store still has shovels. Daniel chuckled. He said, "Oh, the pizza at Salvador's belongs in the toilet," Daniel said. He was shoving French fries in his mouth as if he hadn't eaten in days. I shrugged. Other than finding you running around in the woods like Sasquatch, nothing too spectacular. Ah, yes, the heartburn is real. Other than finding you running around the woods like Sasquatch, nothing too spectacular. I made the decision not to mention the people walking toward the forest, knowing it would only worry him more after his own experience. I heard a lot of activity out there, but I didn't see much, except some movement on the security cameras. That floating old man is still there. You've seen him. I know you have. Oh, the rags, thankfully. I took a sip of my drink. And I think there's something new stomping around, but I didn't get a good look at it. Daniel lowered his eyebrows. Yeah, I nodded. I got a few glimpses of something crawling around, slinking between the trees. Never seen it before, but it was big. And it was fleshy. Had a lot of limbs. Daniel shivered. All the more reason to stay in your bed, nerd, I teased, giving him a pointed look. What else? Oh, yeah, Bartholomew bit me again. Shitty little bastard, man. Look at my finger. I shoved my hand in his face, and Dan inspected the bandage around my middle finger while I pouted. He said sarcastically, Ugh, I know. I tossed my straw wrapper at Daniel, getting it caught in his hair. We both laughed, and he threw a fry right back that hit me square on the nose. Great. Now I had a greasy, salty nose and a dirty truck. I can't help it. I live to be a pest. You know that about me. Oh, speaking of pests, though, there's been a fuck ton of bugs on the windows since yesterday. I counted about 460 wasps before I got bored. Daniel made a small of interest, chewing his burger. Babe, we are in hell, I said with a snort. I liked this. We weren't talking about the fog. We weren't talking about what happened the night of the invasion. I knew it was on Daniel's mind, as it always was, but just this once, I didn't want him to obsess over it. Just this once, I wanted him to eat a fucking burger in peace. It made me wonder what would happen if we had met under different circumstances. What if we lived in this town instead of Pine Haven? Maybe we'd still be friends. Maybe instead of talking about horrors in the woods, we'd be talking about the company Christmas party or what kind of gift to get our spouses or who has the best lights on the block. I couldn't think like that for too long. It made me miss a life that never happened. On the drive back home, it was me in the driver's seat and Dan next to me, making shapes on the window fog with his finger. We listened to some other town's radio station and immersed ourselves in a mundane, imaginary world for that hour it took to circle the edge of the mountain. But when we turned on that horrible road that would lead us deeper between the valleys, we once again grew quiet and uneasy. I followed Dan to his apartment. We talked on our way up the stairs, trying to distract ourselves with holiday decorating plans. "All right, so picture this," I said. "Big boy's head, mounted on the wall, right behind the kitchen. Follow me? And then we get a bunch of string lights and loop them around his giant stupid antlers." Daniel snapped his fingers excitedly. "Yes!" I laughed as we started to climb up the staircase. "Oh, this place is going to smell like rotten eggs, but it'll be so kick-ass." Daniel shook his head. "He has indeed become a big boy," I sighed, trying not to think too much about the reality of our jokes and daydreams. Soon enough, when we got to Dan's door, he reached into his bag and pulled out a spare set of keys. He jingled them toward me. "Thanks, Dan," I interrupted him, taking the keys. "I think we'll be okay." We said goodnight and shared a brief hug, and for the first time, I was more afraid for my friend out here than I was afraid for the one in the tower tonight. I only got a few steps away when I turned again, taking a sharp breath before Dan closed the door completely. "Hey, Danny," I said, catching him just in time. I hesitated, wanting to keep him in my watchful gaze for just a moment longer. "Listen, call me anytime. Text me. Knock on my door. I don't care. If you can't sleep, I'll probably be awake too." He gave me the tiniest, sad smile and nodded his head. He said. I watched him close the door and listened for the lock before I took another step. I hoped with every cell in my body that he didn't know how to use a set of keys while he was asleep. When I got to my own apartment, it was still a mess. I pushed aside the half-unpacked boxes and flopped down on the couch, falling asleep with my clothes on while the sun began to rise. I had a dream. It started out as a memory. We were parked at the edge of the woods, my dad and I, sitting in the bed of a pickup truck. I looked over at him, his thick red beard, his sun-tanned face covered in freckles. He was wearing his coat, orange with yellow stripes. We were watching smoke rise in the distance. "Why are you setting fires in the woods?" I asked curiously, kicking my little legs back and forth. One of my shoes was untied. "Won't the animals get hurt?" He laughed. It was a deep belly laugh, quiet and low.
"Oh, don't you worry now, Ginger Snap. None of the animals are getting hurt. It's called a controlled burn. We have to do 'em now and then to get rid of things that are old and dead so that they don't cause problems."
I scrunched my mouth to one side. I assumed he meant dead trees, dead plants. "Problems like wildfires?" My dad stared out into the trees slowly, nodding.
"Yeah, baby, like wildfires."
He was quiet for a long moment before he looked at me and smiled.
"Here, I've got something for you."
He jumped down and started to pull the sleeves of his coat off, a thermal shirt underneath. He handed the coat to me. It was heavy, smelling like smoke, gasoline, and pine.
"It's big now, but you'll grow into it,"
he said.
"You hold on to that, you hear? One day it'll be an old antique, and it'll remind you of me when you're grown."
"Don't you need it?" I asked, looking at the smoke rising in the distance.
"Now, Little Red,"
my dad said.
"your old man's getting a promotion soon. This is all yours."
I was too young to catch the sadness in his voice. That low Virginia drawl laced with years of regret. The finality of it all. I looked down at the coat with a smile, bringing it up to my face and closing my eyes. "Thanks, Papa," I said, breathing in the scent of the woods and the fires. "I'll take good care of—" When I looked back up, he wasn't there anymore. An ill wind blew, tickling the back of my neck and sending the dead autumn leaves rolling across the grass. I was looking into the trees. Miles and miles of untamed wilderness, smoke rising from its depths. And right there at the tree line, where the forest met the empty dirt, a mountain lion stood completely still, watching me from afar. It had a new face. A miserable, twisted, agonized human face. When I woke up, I felt a draft. The crack in my window had gotten even bigger, and the freezing wind was whistling through it. I sat up quickly, relieved to see 4 apartment walls around me in the soft blue light of an overcast day. Shit, I whispered, noticing the apartment door was slightly ajar. I had locked it. I knew I did. I got up and put a blanket over my shoulders, rushing over to push it closed and lock it tightly. Once the deadbolt clicked into place, my spine tingled from the base all the way up to the back of my neck. It was that feeling of being watched, that fear of someone standing behind you, about to strike. I listened first, hearing the static of the flickering television and the quiet, croaking gasp of something struggling to breathe. "Dan?" I whispered, hoping my sleepwalking friend had crept in at some point. "Danny?" It wasn't him. A wet cough came from the corner of the living room, and I turned my head with a startled gasp. A shadow hunched on all 4s, lingered in the corner, half hidden behind a stack of moving boxes. It shivered, weak and cold, and I could see the glow of eyes against a face that was emaciated and vaguely human. It wheezed, struggling to breathe through old, rotten lungs. I watched as it took a single step toward me, strings of thick black drool falling out of its open mouth. I stumbled over myself as I ran back toward the couch, putting distance between us. "Get out," I hissed, my heart racing. I grabbed my pillow and threw it into the corner at its feet. "Get out!" It didn't move, but something stirred in its throat. It was trying to speak. The mere suggestion of that croaking voice made my spine crawl, and I threw myself off the couch and toward the light switch. When I flicked on the light, it was gone. He was gone. But was he ever really? I couldn't get back to sleep after that. I paced back and forth across the room, my chest on fire as images flooded back into my head. Images I had banished a long time ago. I couldn't forget the night after graduation, the party in the woods, and the creature that limped toward me with that grotesque face. That horrible, miserable face. Once upon a time, I drank my life away just to forget the look in his eyes as he begged for death, and how he groaned and whined with 2 separate voices when I wouldn't give it to him. The room still smelled like gasoline and smoke. I wondered if he was still out there, still begging for death. How many years has it been? How badly did he still hurt? Did he hate me for running away? I grabbed the tequila from the kitchen and I drank until I made myself sick. Did I enjoy it? No, fuck no. As I hung my head over the toilet seat, vomiting and crying at the same time, I felt nothing but shame and self-disgust. But it was the only way to finally get myself to fall asleep. I didn't have any dreams for the rest of the night. Sure, I woke up feeling like shit. I knew I would. But for a very brief moment in time, my brain was completely silent. When morning arrived and I got ready for work, nursing a terrible headache the whole time, Daniel was already waiting at the bottom of the stairwell. To be honest, a part of me was afraid that he wasn't going to be there. He looked fine, though. He was freshly bathed, well-rested. He combed his hair and had his shoes on the right feet and everything. When I got closer, I realized he had a bow tie with Christmas lights on it. Oh, dear Lord, he was charging up. He was about to change into his most powerful final form. One thing we all know about Danny, he's absolutely insufferable around the holidays. After the night I had, however, I was happy to see someone in a good mood. "Hey, Sleeping Beauty. Any impromptu hikes last night?" I asked as I met him at the bottom of the stairs. He said proudly, snapping his suspenders. I nodded a little too eagerly. "Yeah, I slept pretty good," I lied. "Hey, think we've still got donuts at the station? I could go for a donut right now. I could go for several donuts." Daniel gave me a sharp side eye that I could feel even after I passed him. He said, his tone a little more cautious. "Want me to drive?" I interrupted him, spinning my keys on one finger. The look I gave him was a warning, telling him not to ask. "Let it go," it said. And thankfully, he seemed to understand. We took my truck to the fires. Whoops, hold on. We took my truck to the station, still filled with the scent of day-old French fries. When we arrived, we found Finn on a ladder, fiddling with something outside the shed. When we arrived, we found Finn on a ladder, fiddling with something outside the shed. Daniel asked, squinting at a small device stuck to the wall. Finn said, hopping down off the ladder and clapping his hands together. He had a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, clenched between his teeth. "What happened?" I asked. Finn answered, smoke billowing out from above his graying mustache. Daniel said softly. His eyes were focused on the tree line. One specific spot in particular, to be exact. And there was nothing there but the shadows cast by the pines and the glitter of falling snow. I noticed the way his expression turned uneasy, and I gave him a quick pat on the arm. "Come on, champ," I said. "Let's go inside." Before we could get away, Finn cleared his throat and stepped out in front of me, turning his eyes to Daniel for just a moment. I noticed the way Dan looked between the two of us, as if wondering if something was wrong. I thought the exact same thing. He didn't argue, though, and moments later he was giving us a quick grin before walking back up to the tower alone, looking back only once or twice in suspicion. I folded my arms to fight off the cold, raising my eyebrows at Finn. "If this is about Danny, I think he's feeling a little better," I said, fidgeting from one foot to the other. "Well, he's a little jumpy, but..." Finn's words were blunt, direct, so sure of himself. He looked down at me with a stern brow and tight lips, his jaw clenched. When I opened my mouth to respond, he put up a single finger to silence me. I began to squirm nervously on the spot, looking down at the snow as I crossed my arms tighter. I had a bad night. A couple of bad nights. I'm over it. Finn took a step forward, his face assertive but not unkind. He showed his compassion in very harsh ways sometimes, but that straightforward kind of care was how I always knew he was looking out for us. He spoke quietly. I shuffled my feet, hands tucking themselves inside the pockets of my coat. Briefly, I glanced around to make sure Daniel had gone back into the building. I don't want Dan to know, I admitted. Finn promised me, standing up straight again. He put a heavy hand on my shoulder. Yeah, we will. I drew my coat in closer, turning around. Thanks, Finn. Good luck today, he said confidently, flicking his cigarette butt into the woods. As he stomped off, he yelled back at me one last time. When I got up the stairs, Daniel was already at his desk and stirring a cup of powdered hot cocoa. He asked. I made a up a quick lie. Oh, he just wanted to know how I was settling into the new place. He, might come help me fix up a broken window later. I paused as I untied my boots. Oh, and he said not to get into any trouble today, Daniel said quietly, a peppermint candy between his teeth. I put up my coat, did the weather and news broadcast, and then Daniel and I spent the rest of the morning talking about better things. We talked about the holidays. We talked about what we thought the Rangers did when they went out to the woods and whether or not it included battling animals in hand-to-hand combat. I sketched a little picture of Fen punching an elk in the throat, and we hung it up on the corkboard. It's strange, isn't it? This codependent relationship we have with this tower. Everything about Pinehaven made me want to burn this whole goddamn place to the ground, but when we're up here, we have a purpose. We have something to occupy our minds. Up here, we're important. Almost as soon as I did my daily introductions, we got our first caller. You've reached 104.6 FM, Pinehaven Radio. This is Evelyn speaking. Each time I answered the phone, I was more exhausted. My head was pounding. The questions and complaints hadn't stopped ever since the night of the invasion. Yeah, I got a question, a woman said on the other end. She had a smoker's cough and sniffled like she had a cold. I live on the outskirts, round by the old car wash. You know it? Oh, sure, I know it. Well, rowdy kids have been hanging out near my property every night, she continued. Anyone listening out there, tell your kids to stop causing all that ruckus. The ruckus? Well, what are they doing? I asked, writing down the time so I could send the recording to the sheriff later. Screaming awful in the middle of the night. The woman coughed again, throaty and wet. Shrieking bloody murder while running out in the woods, climbing trees and whatnot, and they gotta be letting off fireworks or something, 'cause there's always a light coming in my windows after dark. A light? Every night? Every goddamn night. Purple, real bright. I looked at Dan out of the corner of my eye, knowing he was listening in and making the same connections I was. Screaming from the woods wasn't anything new. But the light? It wasn't just her. Others saw it too. Folks on the edge of the village, the mailman doing his rounds early in the morning, a man taking his dog out late one night. Everyone seemed to agree about one thing. It was hypnotic, mesmerizing, almost irresistible. I don't feel good about it, I said after our microphones were off. I reached a shaking hand toward my coffee cup, but just as my fingertips touched the handle, I watched it slide away from me. In an instant, the cup went flying toward the wall at top speed, shattering into pieces and leaving a stain on the wood. Daniel and I both flinched, and a yelp of surprise left my throat. My heart was racing. The screens were flickering again. On the security camera monitors, we watched the view of the trees turn to static. The bars took on a bright pink color, so harsh it made our eyes sting. And within moments, it was over. Only the broken cup still remained, leaving a wet spot on the floor where lukewarm coffee was now seeping into the wood. I should know better than to be startled by this shit, I said with a sigh, standing up and shuffling off to the kitchenette to grab a broom. When I turned back around, I saw Daniel still staring at the monitor in front of his desk, his eyes tight. His tired eyes narrowed and brows pinched together in thought. Hey, I said, reaching out to gently pat him between the shoulders. Fallen asleep? He broke his gaze away from the screen and looked up at me, his expression changing in a flash. I thought he would elaborate. He didn't. He stared forward, lost in some thought, his fingernails scraping against the edge of his desk. I was about to say something, but the phone suddenly rang. We had another caller. I sat back down and answered it, half expecting it to be the same as the other stories. Instead, all I heard was a high-pitched buzz. I tapped on my headset, wincing. The buzz was only getting louder. Hello? I called out. Are you there? Hello? Daniel was looking at me with narrowed eyes, then glanced at the console. It didn't show a phone number. Rather, it was just 7 zeros on the screen. At first, there was silence. Then a soft stream of white noise started to fade in, followed by a low voice that I couldn't quite understand. It was speaking quickly, almost as if it was talking backwards or in another language. It was so quiet that I held the headphones closer to my ears, pushing it against my skull until I could hear the pounding of my own pulse. Then the buzzing began again. I tapped the headset one more time and immediately felt a sharp sting to the inside of my ear. God, Jesus Christ, it hurt. With a yelp, I tore it off and put a hand up to my head, feeling the pain blooming somewhere deep inside. I could feel it in my sinuses, making my eye water as something moved and fluttered within that space between my ears and my nose. Dan was already standing up and trying to pull my hands away. He asked in a panic, surely remembering what happened to him on his first day of work. The bursting eardrum, the blood, the pain. God, yes, I can hear you. There's something inside my ear, I yelled back, slapping the side of my head to try and dislodge it. God, get it out! Get it out! Daniel grabbed my head, both hands squishing the sides of my skull to hold me still, as he looked inside my ear canal. I did as I was told. The feeling of something wiggling deep down inside my ear made me feel sick. It was like an itch I couldn't scratch, tickling the tubes and cavities I couldn't reach. There was a chill creeping up my spine that wouldn't stop. Nearly as bad as the feeling of Daniel sticking a finger in the side of my head and digging around trying to grab something. Daniel exclaimed, quickly pulling something out and cupping it in his hands. I heard the buzz a little weaker now, and that fluttering sensation was gone. All it left behind was a shuddering sting. Fuck. All it left behind was a sharp sting and a swollen pulse. Daniel looked between his fingers, getting his eye way too close to the insect for comfort. He quickly headed for the fire escape, disabling the alarm with an elbow and slipping outside to release the insect before it started stinging him, too. I followed after him and propped open the fire escape, a hand over my ear as it started to turn large and red. Daniel and I watched the wasp fly off, making its way toward the tree line. You know, I should have been a little surprised that he didn't just smash the damn thing and call it a day. But that wasn't what Danny Boy was all about. Even after years of torment in this godforsaken hellhole, he remained one of the gentlest people I had ever known. He was tender, forgiving, genuine. I respected him for that. He was a better person than I was. I would have squashed the little piss bitch. We stood there on the fire escape for a while. I was looking up at the tops of the mountains, watching the clouds drift slowly behind them, and noticing the way they blended with the constant fog, always swirling around the peaks. When I glanced at Daniel, he was looking down at the tree line instead. He had a sort of constipated look on his face, tense and tight-jawed. What now? I asked him, still poking at the sore spot on my ear. Daniel took a shaky breath, tearing his eyes away. I looked at the spot where he had been staring, but I didn't see anything except for a very subtle shiver in the leaves. The shadow between the pines seemed a little darker, a little thicker. He finally said. He swallowed thickly. But it was important. I could tell. As I looked into Daniel's haunted expression, I thought back to the figure I saw in my apartment when I was still half asleep. I thought about Jennifer whispering in my ear in the grocery store. If I was followed by shadows that no one else could see, surely Daniel was too. Perhaps his shadows followed him even closer. Damn, we out here causing chaos and shit. Not just bee guy. That was wasp guy. Fair enough. Okay. All right. Chapter 4 is down. Looks like nothing. I don't have anything in chapter 5. Let me see. Chapter 6. Let's get chapter... Okay, chapter 4 was saved. So, let's see. Yeah, so we've got nothing for chapter 6. I think chapter 6 is Finn's or someone else's. Okay. So, what do we have left for chapters? Hold on a second. Let me take a look here. So 16 chapters in total. Chapter 5 is... Yeah, chapter 5 is Finn's. 7 is Daniel. And then 8. Okay, hold on. Let me look. Just trying to figure out where we're at with everything. I may need a break. We've been narrating for quite some time now. And my voice is voicing. Oh, so... I think... So chapter 6 is a byline. Chapter 7 is Danny. Chapter 8 is finding the other forest rangers. Okay. Okay. I think maybe we break, honestly. It's almost 5. I did quite a lot of work today for that. Yeah, I think so. All right. I'll keep it going probably tomorrow though. Even though you guys are missing half the story, but you know, it's the fun of it. I'm pretty sure the chapter that I'm a little leery of is, I think, like, I want to say 10 or 11, but I may keep an eye on that. So, I'm going to do that really quick and take a break. But you guys are amazing. I adore you. As always, you can find all my stuff at autumnivyofficial.com. A Lonely Broadcast Book 2 will be out within probably the next month and a half. We just want to make sure it's right for you guys above anything else. And then I should be able to stream normally on Thursday. I really need to get this book done before moving on to the next one and just making sure my ducks are in a row. So you guys are amazing. I adore you. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Drink water. Please drink water.